In this new Dead by Daylight update, we're bringing
cross progression. Please give us cross progression.
Please add cross progression.
Cross progression,
I think people want cross progression in Dead by Daylight. I don't know. Just a hunch. But what is cross progression exactly, and why don't we have it in the game yet? Essentially, what it means is that anything you unlock or buy on one platform will transfer over if you decide to play that game on another platform. You don't have to start over. That also usually comes with crossplay, the ability to play with others on different platforms. All of that is extremely consumer friendly as it prioritizes the player's experience. It lets us have a choice in how we want to play a game. As such, it's become a pretty common thing with a lot of major titles. However, it wasn't always like this. Before 2018, cross progression was not that good. It was almost non-existent. So it was an absolute game changer when the first major instance of this occurred in Fortnite. A little less than a year after its launch, it was announced that PC, Xbox, and mobile players could all play together, and not just that, all your stuff on one platform transfers over if you want to play on another. That was absolutely groundbreaking. That hasn't been done on such an immense scale like this before, but there was something missing. Where was the crossplay cross-progression support for PlayStation? In September of the prior year, there was actually some sort of behind-the-scenes technical issue in Fortnite that, for the first time in general ever, allowed Xbox and PlayStation players to play with each other. Everyone loved that. People could finally cross the console line and play with their friends like never before, and it's gone. Like I said, it was a technical error. As fun as it wasn't intentional. But people got a taste of crossplay and wanted more. That includes the CEO of Microsoft Gaming, Phil Spencer. This instance with Fortnite wouldn't be the first time Sony has been difficult to work with. For a long while, they were the reason that Rocket League and Minecraft players couldn't play with their friends that were on other platforms. Sony would even claim that their reluctance here was a matter of security. They were supposedly just concerned over the safety of their users, and they didn't want to expose them to an environment that was not totally 100% in their control. That's actually really nice, if that were the whole truth. First of all, letting information be shared between consoles isn't the most risky, complicated thing to do. Psyonix, the developers behind Rocket League, said at E3 that Microsoft had the highest and most complex requirements for security, so meeting those barriers made it easier to deal with the requirements of the other platforms. The hard work had been done. So essentially, it was actually Microsoft that had the highest concerns over safety here. If that was genuinely what Sony was worried about, Microsoft's crossplay requirements would have probably been enough to convince them. As Psyonix also said, all we have to do is check that box and it would be up and running in less than an hour all over the world. But why exactly was Sony so hesitant about being a part of this? The answer isn't as wholesome as them being worried about you. Although they were worried about something, their stock price. Let's use our imagination here and think about this from their point of view. Let's get into the mind of a business executive. Alright, in the console wars at the time, PlayStation was the most successful. That's not a matter of opinion, that's a fact. In the 2010s, Sony sold the most units of consoles and produced tons of memorable high-quality games. Amongst the competition, they were in the lead and they wanted to keep that spot. And then comes along the notion of crossplay and cross-progression. If you were in charge of Sony and your job relied on how much money you brought into the company, why would you want this? If you openly welcomed it, you'd lose money. Say goodbye to your chunk of base game, DLC, and cosmetic revenue if people could just buy that stuff elsewhere. That would also mean they spend less time on your platform, lowering the amount of time they give your brand. But there's something else that they had to consider here. Their own player base hating them. It's hard to profit off of people who are upset with you. I looked up how to tie a tie for this bit, and I think I messed up because it's on way too tight. Fortunately for us, public opinion was so intense and there was enough bad press out there that Sony eventually changed their mind. They would give in to what players wanted and would allow crossplay and cross-progression for all of these games mentioned, including Fortnite. Although they did start this whole entire process all over again when the Switch port for it was announced. But even when they conceded, their sense of competition creeped in. They wanted some kind of edge. They needed to be ahead of everyone else somehow. That came in the form of a number of exclusive cosmetics that could only be unlocked on their consoles, such as skins and special variations. Their native title characters also spread the brand image by being in these games. While Xbox also tries to do the same, it's not nearly at Sony's level. Despite their efforts, Sony never wanted to compete like this. They were fine with the way things were before, with it just being about selling more games and more consoles. So it shouldn't be any surprise when I say this, but looking back on it all, they absolutely hated crossplay. As part of the Epic Games vs. Apple lawsuit, a lot of confidential information was released. That includes this message from Epic Games to Sony, entailing everything they're willing to do so that Sony agrees to enable crossplay and cross progression. What ended up happening is something that Sony didn't want the public to know. In fact, they filed to try to keep these documents from being released. So to summarize, what this deal ended up being is one where Epic Games covered potential losses that Sony would take from opening up their network. To be specific, that's if the PlayStation Network revenue share, which is made up of every player that has a linked PlayStation account buying something on any platform, is divided by the PS4 gameplay share, which is how much was bought on the console. If the result is greater than 0.85, nothing happens. But if it's less, then Epic Games has to pay up. For example, in month 2 of this slide, PlayStation players spent $1 million across all platforms, but $600,000 of that was spent from the actual PS4 console. As a result of this agreement, Epic Games would pay $52,000, since Sony didn't make enough money that month. They're the only platform that Epic Games has to compensate for crossplay and cross progression. As such, it's not a stretch to say that Sony probably has other similar deals with other companies. Now that we have a deeper understanding of how much work it takes to get Sony on board, let's talk about Dead by Daylight and how cool it would be if you follow me on Twitch to watch when I play it. I stream every single Monday and Friday at 7 p.m. Central, so stop on by if you ever want to hang out with me in the community. Thanks, I'm excited to see you over there. A little bit before this script was written, Dead by Daylight reached 60 million players worldwide 7 years after its release. It's still going strong with a very active and vocal community, a community that's long strived for cross progression. While it is available for both Steam and the Epic Games Store, general cross progression is arguably one of the most requested features for this game. Players could spend a lot of time and money on characters on console, but if they want to get a PC and switch over to that, they're gonna have to start all over again. Take for example, friend of the channel, Lee's Gaming. If you can't tell, he kinda sorta likes Nancy Wheeler from Stranger Things. You know, just a little bit. However, much like many others, he couldn't use her on PC for a long time, even though she was his main on console. This is because the Stranger Things chapter was removed in 2021. So if you didn't have these characters or cosmetics on your preferred system, and you weren't willing to spend a paycheck on a DLC key, tough luck. Luckily, the license returned in 2023, but the issue of players not being able to use their progress characters across platform lines still remains. Lee can't use his Prestige 100 Feng Min on PC. Many others are in that same boat for characters they've sunk an ungodly amount of hours into. Again, that also includes all the cosmetics they've either unlocked or bought for those characters. There was a point in time where a solution seemed inevitable. Dead by Daylight was supposed to get cross progression. It was so close to happening that the official Twitter account even said that it was coming soon. TM. This was back in 2020, and the link page now leads to a 403 error, meaning that access to it has been blocked off, and not even Wayback Machine can properly go back to see the page. So what happened? This next part is entirely speculative as we don't really have any solid details. But the most likely scenario is that the game developers, Behavior Interactive, had some sort of deal in place with the console companies. However, that deal could have been pulled because someone, either Sony or another company, got cold feet. This is really interesting here because unlike Fortnite, who had cross progression between Xbox and PC prior to Sony joining, neither Xbox or Nintendo has allowed this feature in Dead by Daylight. So it stands to reason that if there was a deal, then it would have been a joint one, where everybody had to be on the same page, where everybody had to agree to the terms so that everyone could benefit equally. There was a little bit of copium out there in mid-2023 when PlayStation was added as an option to link a behavior account with it. But that wasn't for DBD specifically, and nothing really came out of that. As for Behavior's response, whenever this question would be asked, they always say the exact same things. They would love to add cross progression, but it's unfortunately out of their control. DBD is a relatively big game, but not as big as Fortnite or a Hoyoverse title. If Epic Games, one of the world's biggest gaming companies, had trouble getting Sony's cooperations, I don't even want to imagine what Behavior has had to go through with negotiations. They certainly won't be able to hash out the same type of deal that Epic Games did, where they pay an immense amount for Sony's revenue losses. However, all hope is not lost. It's not impossible. At the time when I started working on this video, Warframe and Apex Legends have added cross progression years after their release. Coincidentally, while I was writing this script, there was a DBD satisfaction survey, and in that survey, there's a question about cross progression. It asks, how interested would you be if the only way to make it available is if characters were only shared across platforms when purchased in-game, but not as DLC? Basically, that means anything that's bought in the actual store with the in-game currencies, like cosmetics and characters, would be able to transfer over. However, DLC packages bought from platform stores, like the PlayStation Store and Steam, would have to be rebought. That's how most people buy licensed chapters. It's also worth mentioning that Behavior did also recently change how DLC packages were sold, grouping characters together and overall making them cheaper as a whole. To me, these two things happening around the same time are a very good indicator of what's to come. I can't say how long it'll take or how it'll look like, and although this isn't an issue that affects me personally, I know a lot of players would kill for this type of feature. In spite of how long it's taken, I hope we get cross progression soon in some form, and I can't wait until this comment section is filled with people saying, "We won." Thanks for watching.